Stand in the arrivals hall at Suvarnabhumi Airport in Bangkok on a Tuesday evening when flights from London, Frankfurt, Tokyo and Sydney have just landed, and you'll witness something that would have been unthinkable just 5 years ago. The immigration lines that used to snake back for 45 minutes to an hour now process travellers in 15 to 20 minutes because there simply aren't enough people arriving. The money exchange counters that used to have queues of tourists converting currency site mostly idle. The SIM card vendors who used to do brisk business selling tourist packages now outnumber the customers browsing their offerings. The taxi queue that used to stretch across the arrivals hall has more drivers than passengers, with dozens of cabs sitting empty while drivers smoke cigarettes and wait for the next customer that might not come for another 30 minutes. Drive from the airport toward any major tourist destination, Bangkok, Pattaya, Phuket, Chiang Mai, and you'll see the same pattern repeated everywhere. Empty hotel lobbies, restaurants with more staff than diners, tour operators sitting idle, attractions operating at half capacity or less. Thailand, the country that built much of its modern economy on tourism, that welcomed nearly 40 million international visitors annually at its peak, that marketed itself as the land of smiles and positioned itself as Southeast Asia's must-visit destination. Art is in the midst of a tourism collapse so severe that it threatens the livelihoods of millions of Thais and raises fundamental questions about the country's economic future. The numbers tell a story that Thailand's tourism authority desperately wants to hide but can't. In 2019, Thailand welcomed 39.8 million international tourists who generated approximately 1.91 trillion baht, roughly $60 billion, in tourism revenue. That represented about 12% of Thailand's entire GDP and supported an estimated 4.3 million jobs directly and indirectly. In 2024, international arrivals reached only 28.2 million, a decline of 29%. But the revenue collapse was even more severe. Tourism generated only 1.18 trillion baht, a 38% decline from peak levels. When adjusted for inflation, the real revenue decline exceeds 45%. The projections for 2025 are worse. Through the first 2 months of the year, arrivals are tracking 8% to 12% below 2024 levels, suggesting the decline is accelerating rather than stabilizing. Industry insiders privately predict 2025 could see arrivals fall below 26 million, with revenue potentially dropping below 1 trillion baht for the first time since 2013. Hotel occupancy rates across Thailand's major destinations paint an even grimmer picture. Bangkok hotels are averaging 56% occupancy year-to-date in 2025, compared to 78% in 2019. Phuket, Thailand's premier beach destination, is at 52% compared to 82% in 2019. Pattaya is running at 48% occupancy. Chiang Mai is at 54%. Even Koh Samui, which used to maintain occupancy above 75% year-round, is struggling at 51%. These occupancy levels are below break-even for most properties, not meaning hotels across Thailand are losing money every month they operate. The composition of tourists has shifted in ways that have destroyed the economics of Thai tourism. The big-spending, long-staying tourists who used to form the foundation of Thailand's tourism industry have largely disappeared, replaced by budget travellers who stay shorter and spend less. Russian tourists, who used to be Thailand's second-largest source market and among the highest spenders, have collapsed from 1.8 million arrivals in 2019 to fewer than 200,000 in 2024. A decline of 89%. These were tourists who stayed an average of 16 to 18 days and spent 80,000 to 120,000 baht per trip. Their disappearance has been catastrophic for hotels, restaurants, and tour operators who built business models around long-staying Europeans. Our Chinese tourists have returned after COVID restrictions lifted, but in far smaller numbers and with completely different spending patterns. In 2019, Chinese tourists numbered 11 million and were Thailand's largest source market. In 2024, arrivals reached only 6.8 million, a 38% decline. More damaging is how they're traveling. Younger, more budget-conscious, booking through Chinese platforms, staying in Chinese-owned hotels, eating at Chinese restaurants, taking Chinese-operated tours. Very little of their spending flows to local Thai businesses. The average Chinese tourist now spends 35,000 to 42,000 baht per trip compared to 65,000 to 75,000 baht in 2019, a decline of 43% to 47%. European tourists are down 32% overall, with Germans declining 38%, French down 35%, British down 28%. The strong baht, European economic pressures, and Thailand's deteriorating reputation have all contributed. The European tourists who are still coming are staying shorter, an average of 8.2 days compared to 12.5 days in 2019, and spending less per day due to budget constraints and the unfavourable exchange rate. What's filling the gap, to the extent there is one, are domestic Thai tourists and visitors from neighbouring countries like Malaysia, Cambodia and Laos. But these tourists have completely different spending patterns. Domestic tourists spend an average of 2,800 to 3,500 baht per trip, compared to international tourists who used to spend 45,000 to 55,000 baht. The math simply doesn't work. You need 13 to 15 domestic tourists to generate the same revenue as one international tourist, and the infrastructure, the hotels, restaurants, attractions. Sun was built to serve international visitors, not domestic day trippers. The cost explosion has destroyed Thailand's fundamental value proposition as an affordable destination. For decades, Thailand's primary appeal was simple: incredible experiences at unbeatable prices. That equation no longer exists. Accommodation costs have increased 55% to 75% since 2019. A hotel room in Bangkok that cost 1,200 baht is now 2,000 to 2,200 baht. Beach hotels that were 2,500 baht are now 4,200 to 4,800 baht. Even hostels have gone from 350 baht to 650 to 750 baht per bed. Food prices have followed the same trajectory. Street food that cost 40 to 50 baht is now 80 to 100 baht. Restaurant meals have increased 45% to 60%. Tours and activities that were 1,200 to 1,500 baht now cost 2,200 to 2,800 baht. When tourists do the math, so Thailand is no longer the bargain it once was. A week in Thailand that would have cost $600 to $800 in 2018 now costs $1,200 to $1,600. At those price points, tourists start comparing Thailand to Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines, and increasingly, they're deciding those alternatives offer better value. Emma and David, a British couple in their 30s who just finished what they said was their last Thailand trip, were brutally honest when I spoke with them at Bangkok's airport. This is our fourth time in Thailand. We came in 2014, 2017, 2019, and now. Every previous trip was amazing. This one shattered our love for the country. The costs have become insane. We budgeted based on our 2019 trip and blew through that budget in 5 days. Everything is double or triple what it was. A pad thai that used to cost 40 baht is now 100 baht. Our hotel that was 800 baht in 2019 is now 1,800 baht, and the quality is worse. David continued, but it's not just the money. We got scammed 3 times in Bangkok in 2 days. A tuk-tuk driver took us to a gem shop instead of where we asked. A taxi refused to use the meter and charged us 500 baht for a 100 baht trip. We got a bill at a bar on Khao San Road for 3,000 baht when we'd only had 2 beers. Everyone is trying to rip you off and it's exhausting. We're going to Vietnam next year instead. The environmental degradation has reached a point where it's actively driving tourists away. Thailand's beaches, once pristine paradises, are now visibly polluted and degraded. Plastic trash litters the sand despite cleanup efforts. The water quality around popular islands has deteriorated due to boat traffic, runoff from development, and inadequate sewage treatment. Coral reefs that used to be world-class diving and snorkeling destinations are bleached and dying. Tourists arrive expecting the Thailand they've seen in photos and find a reality that's dirty, crowded, and disappointing. Bangkok's air pollution during certain months reaches hazardous levels, with PM 2.5 regularly exceeding 150 to 200 micrograms per cubic meter. Tourists can see and taste the pollution, and health warnings tell them to stay indoors. For people who've traveled thousands of miles for a vacation, being told not to go outside because the air is dangerous is trip-ruining. The pollution has gotten worse over the past 5 years, not better, and there's no meaningful government action to address it. The over-tourism that plagued Thailand's most popular destinations before COVID has returned, but without the revenue to justify it. Maya Bay in Koh Phi Phi, made famous by The Beach, was closed for years to recover from environmental damage and has reopened with daily visitor limits. But tourists who visit now find the experience commercialized and disappointing, not worth the time and expense. Koh Phi Phi itself is overcrowded, trashy, and has lost the paradise quality that made it famous. The scam culture has reached epidemic proportions where it's systematically destroying Thailand's reputation. Jet ski scams, where tourists are accused of damage and extorted for repairs, continue despite being internationally known. Taxi and tuk-tuk scams are ubiquitous, with drivers refusing meters and charging 3 to 5 times normal rates. Bar scams in tourist areas where bills are inflated or tourists are charged for drinks they never ordered happen constantly. Every tourist has a scam story or knows someone who does, and those stories spread virally on social media, deterring potential visitors. Marcus, a 26-year-old German who spent 6 weeks traveling Southeast Asia, was emphatic when comparing Thailand to other countries. "I did Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand. Thailand was by far the worst. In Vietnam, I had 0 problems. 0. People were honest and helpful. In Thailand, I was scammed repeatedly. After a while, you assume everyone is trying to cheat you, and that's not a vacation. I'm telling everyone I know to skip Thailand. The competition from other Southeast Asian destinations has intensified dramatically. Vietnam has invested heavily in tourism infrastructure and marketing, and it's working. Cities like Da Nang, Hoi An, and Nha Trang offer beach experiences comparable to Thailand's at lower costs with better environmental conditions. Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City provide urban experiences similar to Bangkok, but with more authenticity, less pollution, and better value. Indonesia, particularly Bali, has captured enormous market share from Thailand, especially among younger travelers and digital nomads. Bali offers everything Thailand used to offer: beaches, culture, affordability, nightlife, plus better infrastructure for long-term stays, a stronger wellness and yoga scene, and a community of remote workers. The Philippines, with 7,000-plus islands, offers endless beach options that are less crowded and less commercialized than Thai islands. Even Malaysia is competing effectively with destinations like Penang, Langkawi, and the Perhentian Islands, offering good value, better environmental conditions, and less aggressive tourist exploitation. When tourists research Southeast Asia beach destinations, they're increasingly choosing these alternatives over Thailand. The shift in traveler preferences has also worked against Thailand. Modern tourists, especially millennials and Gen Z, want sustainable tourism, authentic cultural experiences, and off-the-beaten-path discoveries. They're conscious about over-tourism and actively avoid destinations known for environmental destruction. Thailand's reputation as an over-touristed, environmentally degraded destination with a party culture makes it unappealing to this growing segment of conscious travelers. Sarah, Sikh, an Australian traveler in her late 20s, explained her decision to skip Thailand on her Southeast Asia trip. "I deliberately didn't include Thailand in my itinerary. Everything I read said it's overcrowded, the beaches are trashed, and you get scammed constantly. I went to Indonesia and Vietnam instead and had amazing experiences. My friends who did go to Thailand came back disappointed and said I made the right choice. The business community in Thailand is in crisis. Hotel owners describe losing money every month, burning through savings to keep properties operating in hope of a recovery that isn't materializing. Restaurant owners report revenue down 45% to 60% from pre-pandemic levels, with many facing imminent closure. Tour operators who survived COVID by taking loans now can't service that debt because tourist volumes haven't recovered." Zomchai, who owns a mid-sized hotel in Pattaya, was candid about his situation. "I'm losing 400,000 to 500,000 baht every month. The hotel is 45% occupied when I need 75% to break even. I've already sold my car, borrowed from family, and I'm behind on bank payments. If this continues another 6 months, I'll have to close. I have 28 employees who depend on these jobs. What happens to them?" The human toll extends to millions of Thais whose livelihoods depend on tourism. Hotel workers, restaurant staff, tour guides, taxi drivers, massage therapists, street vendors all face reduced income, reduced hours, or unemployment. Many have already left tourism entirely, and returning to their home provinces or finding work in other sectors. The tourism workforce that Thailand spent decades building is dissolving, and it won't be easy to rebuild even if tourist numbers recover. The government's response has been inadequate and often counterproductive. Marketing campaigns emphasizing amazing Thailand don't address the fundamental problems of costs, scams, environmental degradation, and poor value. Visa exemptions and extensions attract more budget tourists, but don't solve the problem of needing fewer tourists who spend more rather than more tourists who spend less. There's been talk of cracking down on scams, but enforcement remains weak. The same scams that were problems 10 years ago are still problems today. Environmental regulations exist on paper, but aren't enforced. Development continues unchecked in sensitive areas, further degrading the natural resources that tourism depends on. The tragedy is that Thailand's tourism crisis is largely self-inflicted and could be addressed with political will and coordinated action. The scams could be stopped with enforcement. Environmental degradation could be reversed with regulation and investment. Costs could be moderated by controlling speculation. The value proposition could be restored. But none of this is happening because the short-term incentive is to extract maximum revenue from each tourist rather than building long-term sustainability. The future looks bleak. The most optimistic scenario involves a long, slow adjustment where Thailand accepts permanently lower tourism levels, focuses on higher quality tourists, and sees widespread business failures and consolidation. This still means millions of job losses and profound economic pain for communities that depend on tourism. A more pessimistic scenario sees continued decline where Thailand's reputation deteriorates further, environmental conditions worsen, and the country enters a doom loop where declining tourism reduces economic activity, which reduces government revenue, which makes it harder to address problems, which drives away more tourists. Some analysts believe Thailand could lose 50% of its tourism industry over the next decade if current trends continue. Thailand's tourism golden age is over. The country that defined Southeast Asian tourism for generations, that was synonymous with value, beauty, and hospitality, has become synonymous with scams, environmental destruction, and disappointing value. The empty hotels, struggling businesses, and disappointed tourists leaving vows never to return are evidence that something fundamental has broken. Unless Thailand makes dramatic changes to address costs, scams, environmental degradation, and competition, the collapse will continue. The tourists have noticed that Thailand no longer delivers on its promises, and they're voting with their wallets by choosing other destinations. The land of smiles is becoming the land of empty hotels, and nobody knows how to fix it. Have you visited Thailand recently and been disappointed? Are you choosing Vietnam or Indonesia instead? What would it take for Thailand to win you back? Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more honest reporting on Southeast Asia's changing tourism landscape.